Hi guys. So I know I said that we're focusing on making passive income risk-free, and that is partly true. But the reason why I'm doing this presentation is because I'm fascinated by the technology behind cryptocurrency. And I'm not saying you can't make money, I'm just saying that it's probably not why you should focus and you should invest time in this technology. So I'll start with a story. It's actually a true story. When I moved to Ireland, I went to AIB and I opened it's called a graduate account because I was doing my master's. So a few years later, essentially a couple of weeks ago, they sent me a message saying, you know, your time of banking with no fees is over. You will have to start paying fees because we're moving you from a graduate account to a personal account. And the fees are they're massive. There's an entire book describing what fees you will pay for what. And there's over 50 types of fees. So I put that in comparison to what I'm experiencing using my cryptocurrency, and you'll see what I mean. I tried to imagine a world without all these fees and all these, lack of privacy and the security vulnerabilities and all those things. So I tried to imagine a world, where the monetary system is democratized, meaning that we make the decisions on how the monetary system will work. So we choose how it will behave and what kind of fees we will pay, so that we make it, we make it as smart as possible and as fair as possible. And that's what cryptocurrency is doing, and it's doing it in a way so that the transactions are irreversible, so nobody can take your money back. They're also transparent, meaning that anyone can see how currency is being moved from one account to another, and they're also anonymous, so that nobody can tell which account belongs to who. And when you register for an account, in fact, you don't give any personal information. That kind of helps in security by definition, because nobody can steal your information if there's none, right? Now, on top of that, the transaction fees are minimal. For example, in Ethereum or in Bitcoin, you'll pay 1 to 3 cents per transaction, regardless of how much currency you're sending. And it also is deflationary. Well, it's not really deflationary, but it behaves in that way because the money, the currency in cryptocurrency increases in value over time because the money creation process is very controlled. And you own your bank account, so you own your accounts are essentially yours because you own the private key. If you lose your private key, then whoever owns the private key is also an owner. But that means that a government or a banking institution, any organization can't force anyone to get access to your account. So there's no way this is possible. It's prevented from the technology itself. Now let's look at decentralization, because that's the central point of cryptocurrency. On the left side, you see the centralized systems are essentially how banking systems work right now. The organizations, the banks, control their own infrastructure, and they're centralized in terms of architecture, if you think about that. So they're targeted, they're prone to attacks, they're resilient to, in fact, the cryptocurrency, because it's decentralizing the nodes, if one is attacked, another one will pick up the work, which is essentially the main difference in these two architectures. And they're not controlled by an organization. So cryptocurrencies, they're democratized, like I said, so the entire network as a community makes the decisions in a democratic way. So if they want to change how the cryptocurrency behaves, if they want to change the consensus algorithm or something like that, then the majority will fork and will create another version of that currency, and they will move forward in a different direction. On the other hand, in the traditional banking, you have central banks, you have governments, controlling how much money will be created and when. And this leads to frustrating situations sometimes where, there's hyperinflation. There's things like, a country starts a war and the money loses its value, right? So another main difference is that the banking system relies on trust. You have to trust that your bank will be, responsible and that they will do the right thing, and that they will be able to provide you with your money when you request it. While in the cryptocurrency world, nothing relies on trust. In fact, the technology assumes that there will be, malicious users in that system. And again, the privacy thing is a big one, because in the banking system, you think that you have privacy, but if, for instance, a government in the States, for instance, if they request banking information from a bank, they're sometimes able to get it. If they go through a court process, they will be able to get your identity, they will be able to get your financial history. Now, let's talk about how the cryptocurrency works in terms of technology. It's based on blockchain technology, which is essentially a ledger. It's a book of transactions. So you can see which account, which is this alphanumeric address, sent what amount of money to what address. So this is essentially what the blockchain technology is offering. And you have multiple pages of these things. Imagine them as pages in the book. In the cryptocurrency, in the blockchain technology, we call them blocks. So the blockchain is a chain of blocks. And you add more blocks to it, you add more pages to that ledger as you go forward. Okay, so how do you create an account? You simply create an account by generating a new public address, which is visible to anyone. It's that alphanumeric thing that you saw earlier. You generate one of those, and you provide your own private key, which it should be very private. It should be kept private, because if you lose it, whoever gets access to that private key essentially has access to your own account. Now, because you're generating public addresses, there has to be a way so that people can generate the same public address, right? And the technology offers that functionality by using a huge pool of public addresses. That's 10 to the power of 48, which is unfathomably large. It will take millions of years to generate the same address twice if you're generating them as fast as possible with all the computing power in the world. So it's really impossible to have conflicts like that and security vulnerabilities like that. Okay, and transactions are signed with digital signatures. It's essentially the same thing that when you sign a check, but in the digital world that works better because they can't be copied. There's no way you can generate them twice. You can't replay them and things like that. So how do you generate those signatures? You take the transaction information, which you see on the top left, and you use your private key to sign them, and that generates a signature. And then you take the transaction information with the signature, and that is what constitutes a transaction in the blockchain. With the cryptographic method that they're using, it is possible that someone in the network can use your public key, which is included in the transaction, and the signature, and can verify that it is in fact valid. So that's how they verify that you are the owner of the account and this is an authorized transaction. Okay, so the last thing I want to mention here is that requested transactions are impossible to forge, tweak, or replay. I won't explain exactly how they can't be replayed because we don't have enough time to cover everything here, but keep in mind that they're much more secure than the traditional approach of signing a document. Okay, now, how does this entire system work? I mentioned it's decentralized, so how is it decentralized? This network of computers is essentially a collection of nodes across the world that are performing a simple task of verifying the next block in the chain. So these are called bookkeepers or miners, and their responsibility is to make sure that the transactions added to the ledger are valid transactions. And they do it following a complex process, which I will cover in very little detail. But essentially, they're trying to reach consensus. They're trying to agree between themselves that the next block is actually valid. And when they reach that consensus, they add it to the chain. But what if one of the nodes, one of the miners, is trying to add money to himself or to tweak the transactions that are in his ledger? That is prevented by using a voting system so that consensus is reached when the majority agrees that the next block is actually valid, is legit. So in order to break that system, you have to own the majority of the network. If you are a malicious user and you want to take advantage of the system and add money to yourself, then you have to own 51% of the network. In most cryptocurrencies, that's impossible. Not for an individual, it's impossible for an organization, a government, just because it's massive, it's really impossible to own that much power. In fact, if you try to do that, you will find that you will spend more money doing it than the money you will get out of it. So it's not really feasible. Now, for their work, miners are rewarded with some currency. And that's how the money is generated in a cryptocurrency. It is created out of thin air in a very detailed, in a defined way, which is embedded in the system itself. So, for instance, in Ethereum, whoever mines a block is rewarded with 5 Ether. And that will keep decreasing over time, which is causing the cryptocurrency to be deflationary in conjunction with the fact that people lose their accounts, so that money is essentially destroyed, right? So that's how you make money, and that's why people are mining these networks, in order to generate currency. Okay, so let's visualize this. Let's see how this works. Let's say we have a user in the States who sends a transaction to a miner in South America, and this transaction is propagated to the other miners in the network. And then these guys, they process this transaction, and when one finds the solution, one finds that this is actually valid, the other miners verify that, of course, and that guy who found the solution first is rewarded with that cryptocurrency. Now, I said that they verify the transaction. I want to note here that it's a collection of transactions. So when you send a transaction to the network, it's added to a pool of unverified transactions, and the miners pick from that pool some transactions, and they create a candidate block for the next block to be added to the chain. Again, I want to mention this disclaimer. This is very, very simplified because we don't have enough time to discuss this in detail. But if you want, we can create another session and cover them in a bit more detail, what happens under the hood. So a deeper look in the mining process, but again, this is just superficial, is this algorithm. And this is not the same in every cryptocurrency, right? Keep that in mind. Every version of a cryptocurrency uses a different consensus algorithm, and this is just an example. So the mining process can look something like this. Find a number n such that a hash of that number n in conjunction with the transactions and the blocks, the previous block's ID, will give you a specified outcome, right? So you take these three things and you hash them together. It's essentially, it's a method that takes some input and provides a very specific output so that you can't go backwards, and it's also satisfying the given that no two things can generate the same hash. That's essentially what this hashing algorithm does. So when you generate this output, you check whether your output satisfies the condition. And if it satisfies the condition, it means that you have actually solved the problem, right? If you haven't solved the problem, all you have to do is try with a different number. And because that's the only way of solving the problem, you have to try different numbers again and again as fast as you can. Okay, so now we'll try another number and go and so on. So with a graphics card, for instance, in Ethereum, you can try this process about 29 million times per second. So it happens really fast. You can calculate the probability that you have to find it from the first time, which is really, really small. And okay, let me mention here that by tweaking that x parameter, you can specify how difficult it will be. If you look at the probability there, you can see that as x increases, the simpler the problem is. So they use this functionality in cryptocurrencies to maintain the solution time stable. So that, for instance, in Ethereum, a new block is added on an average of 30 seconds. So every 30 seconds, more or less, a new block is added. In Bitcoin, it's 10 minutes, and so on. But you have to think about this as a network. When you're looking for a solution, every node on the network is looking for that same solution. So your processing power is the combined processing power of all the nodes. As new people join the network, your processing power increases. But by tweaking that x parameter, you can modify the difficulty and keep the time of the solution stable. That's roughly how it works. Okay, so I mentioned that it is really difficult to find the solution, especially if you only have a limited amount of resources, like one graphics card. Just to give you an idea, one graphics card mining Ethereum will take years to find the solution. But when you find that solution, you will get 5 Ether, the whole pie, right? What people tend to do instead is they join networks, mining pools, where they work with other nodes on the network to find the solution. So this is what I'm demonstrating here. These 3 nodes are working together. They have different mining capacity. They have different hardware. And when they find the solution, they split the reward in a relative way so that people are rewarded depending on how much processing power they contributed. And that's what mining pools are. This results in a stable income. So instead of making, let's say, 5 Ether every average 1 year, you make 0.1 Ether every couple days. Okay? Oh, by the way, there are denominations in the currency. You can have 0.00001 Ether. There's no such thing as a 5 cent, because this is the digital currency. Okay, now let me briefly mention the methods you can use to mine these cryptocurrencies. You can use a CPU, a GPU, an ASIC miner, and these are the three basic methods. Each currency uses a different consensus algorithm, like I said, and different methods are better than others. So for instance, in Ethereum, you can mine with a CPU, but the hash rate, the speed at which you try out new hashes every time is much less compared to a GPU. And that means essentially that if you use CPUs to mine Ethereum, you'll probably wait a few decades until you find a solution. The GPU does it much more efficiently, not only in terms of speed, but also in terms of energy. And ASIC miners are specific hardware that are designed to do just this one task of trying different hashes as fast as possible. And you don't want to try to mine a currency that's mined with ASIC hardware, with GPUs or with CPUs. So some currencies prevent ASIC mining for reasons I won't cover in this demonstration here, but in these cases, you can use GPUs. And there are some currencies as well that they only allow CPU mining for their own reasons. So let's look at an example, because I know some of you want to see numbers. And these are very, very, ballpark, numbers that I put together, just to give you an idea of how you make a calculation of your profitability when you're planning to mine a cryptocurrency. So depending on your hardware, you will be able to pre-calculate the hashing power that you have. And that translates to an income, right? It can be, for instance, in the range of 20 to 150 euros per card per month. That's an example for GPUs, right? So a graphics card generates roughly 20 to 150 euros a month. Note that the numbers vary greatly. And that's because not all GPUs are the same. They don't cost the same money. Some GPUs actually can't mine at all. So you need a minimum to meet some minimum requirements. For Ethereum, it's 4 gigabytes of RAM, and high-end GPUs will usually behave better than others. And also, the money that you make depends on the difficulty of the network at that given time, and many other things, such as the current price of the cryptocurrency and all those things. And from that money that you calculate that you will make, you have to subtract the money that you paid for the equipment, which is a one-time cost. And the amounts that I put here are just rough numbers. You can, for instance, you can apply economies of scale and buy 10 cards with a 20% discount, or if you are a big company, you can buy 1,000 cards with 50% discount, and so on and so on.
How often do you have to change these cards to the new one?
Yeah, because they work at 100% capacity, they tend to break after a couple of years.
But in terms of speed,
the speed remains the same, but the difficulty tends to rise.
Yeah.
So
you need faster cards, right?
Yeah. So essentially, as newer nodes appear on the network with better hardware than you, because you're competing against them, your hash rate might be the same, but you will find that you're making less money over time. And then you have to subtract the electricity cost, because these run at 100% capacity. That's a significant cost that you need to calculate. Roughly between 10 to 25 euros per month per card in Ireland, because we're paying 14 cents per kilowatt hour, and in Ukraine they pay 1 cent per kilowatt hour. So just to give you the whole picture here. Okay, and then you have to subtract the mining pool. If you choose to join one, you will have to pay between 1 and 2% of whatever you make. An exchange fee, which is what the exchanges, these companies that convert your cryptocurrency to real-world money, even though I hate this term, both are real-world money, but they're both fiat currencies. They rely on faith that they will have some value. Anyway, and then you will have to pay developer fees, which are essentially, not always, but the good software to mine cryptocurrencies usually come with a developer fee, so that the people who work on them and make them as efficient as possible can keep on working on them. Finally, you have a transactions fee, which is when you're sending money, cryptocurrency, from one account to another, which is a negligible amount of money. Okay, and if you do this math, you calculate your profitability. There are tools that will do it for you. So I will show you some of those tools later. But keep in mind that your hardware will never run 100%. I have a 99% uptime, and I spent a full month working on how to achieve it. My computer literally powers itself on when it loses power and keeps mining. Things like that. So it's not easy to achieve over 90% uptime. At least not in a way that it just runs and you don't have to worry about it. Okay, the pitfalls. Now I told you the good things. These are some of the bad things in this technology. System changes are difficult. You probably heard what was happening in Bitcoin. They had a problem. Transactions took too long to be verified, like roughly an hour. Especially big value transactions, they take a long time before they're verified. So what they tried to do is improve that and fix this problem. But there was an ongoing discussion for months. The community was discussing ideas and things like that. And after a while, they found a solution. They proposed it. They put it in motion. And after like 6 months, they implemented the change. I'm not sure I mentioned proof of work versus proof of stake. But essentially, there are different consensus algorithms. One is based on proof of work, which is what we discussed. You have to do some work to verify that you have the right to vote. Otherwise, people can vote again and again and again, and they can cheat, essentially. So proof of work relies on processing power, while proof of stake essentially is when you reserve some money and you say, I will do my best to verify these transactions, and if somebody catches me cheating, I will lose my stake. And there's a combination of both, a hybrid between proof of work and proof of stake. Now, proof of work is great. It worked for so many years, and it keeps working for most cryptocurrencies, but it's not environmentally friendly. To give you an idea, a transaction in Visa might cost 1 cent in electricity. I'm just assuming here, but this is the difference, the scale, or the scale of the difference. And in a cryptocurrency, it might cost half a euro for one transaction, or something like that, depending on which currency we're talking about. So there's a lot of money being spent in power and electricity just for the purpose of verifying these transactions. The exchange rates are extremely volatile, so you might find that your portfolio of cryptocurrency might be worth 1,000 euros now and 500 30 minutes later. That volatile. But if you zoom out in those graphs of the prices of the exchange rates, you will find that they kind of have an upward trend. The majority of them has an upward trend. So in the long run, you'll probably have more money than you had 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. But these are all speculations, and I'm not trying to convince you in investing, which is a really, really risky thing. I'm just trying to give you the facts here. Okay, and that it doesn't scale very well. They're trying to solve this problem, and they kind of did that in Bitcoin to some extent. But this is an ongoing problem in cryptocurrencies. It will be some time until we can satisfy transaction volumes of the likes of Visa. And the last thing is there's no support line, so make sure you don't lose your private key. It's essentially a very bad thing to do, because if you lose it, that's it. The money is essentially destroyed. It's not hard to get it back, it's impossible. Okay. So let me, actually, do you have any questions at this point?
The transaction amount that you pay, whom do you pay that to?
To the miners, good question. The miners get a specified reward and the transaction fees, right? The reward is designed to reduce over time. So you might have heard that the last Bitcoin will be mined in 2120 something.
Yeah, because only some number of Bitcoins can be mined.
Yeah. After that point, miners will only be rewarded the transaction fees.
So the question is, the prices that you put up about like a monthly scale of how many man hours would you,
To
Is there
build
a-
this system,
no, just like everything you're saying, like to make it worth your while, say €100 a month time.
Right.
Would you be putting-
There's a learning curve.
That's because that's a trade-off too.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't calculate this because I do it anyway, just because I'm interested in the technology. But if you're planning to do this as a full-time business, you have to account for that as well. And I'd say there's no number I can come up with now because it depends how well you want to do it. If you do your homework and you find the best, the most optimized solution for mining, then you will have good profits, but you will spend a lot of time doing your homework. So it's relatively hard. I'd say I spent so far 6 months of evenings and weekends learning about how these things work, comparing hardware and things like that.
So, was it right in that every transaction has to be verified by every node in the network?
Not necessarily. The majority of the network needs to verify a transaction, a block actually. So what happens is the miners on the network are trying to find that nonsense, that nonce number. And when someone finds it, he sends the solution to everyone, and the other nodes in the network, they verify that. And when they reach a consensus, which is essentially a majority, then the block is added to the chain. If some because these are not based in time. Again, I'm drilling into the details now, and I might not make much sense. But the short answer is there are cases where 2 blocks are added to the chain, and they kind of fork. So what happens is the majority will add blocks to their chain, their version of the chain, faster than the other guys, right? And the system is designed in a way that it will favor the longer chain. So you can't cheat the network consistently. You may be able to cheat the network for 1, 2, 3 blocks, but after a while, the majority will build a larger chain. That's roughly how it works.
My question was kind of related to the fact that you mentioned about uptime, that 90% uptime is good. So how does the system deal with that at any one time, and what it was there a few seconds ago might be there anymore?
Yeah, because the number of nodes in the cryptocurrency network is millions. It changes all the time. It's just that, it doesn't require a specific number of nodes to agree that this is valid. It will just happen so that the majority will build the blocks faster. That's roughly how it works. It is a larger subject. We can.
It's able to calculate the majority, but actually knowing the specific number of.
Yes. Yeah. It leads to the result of the majority having their way. It's not exactly as the way as I explained it. We can have an entire day talking about this thing. If you drill into the details, it's actually a lot more complex than this. But that's the fascinating bit, because we're doing all these things with software. There's no trust involved. There's no assumptions. It just works. Any? Yeah.
2 quick questions. How many transactions in a block?
I'm not sure. It depends on the currency. I have no idea. Sorry.
Okay. So, and my other question is, I understand it's impossible to add a single transaction to the blockchain. You're just adding a block which is composed of a set.
Yeah, you can have any number of transactions up to a certain threshold. The technology for each cryptocurrency prevents you from adding more than a specified amount of transactions. And that's what they changed in Bitcoin. They increased that amount by tweaking the technology. So every block can now contain more than what previously could.
Does it not always contain the same amount of transactions?
No, not necessarily.
I suppose they can increase.
They upgraded it, yeah. It can contain less, but not more than a specified threshold. Anyone else?
So when you were talking about uptime, if you're a member of a mining pool, is your uptime taken into consideration when it's decided how much you get from the if you solve the,
Right.
the block?
So what happens in a mining pool is when your hardware starts mining, you can have multiple hardware, multiple PCs mining. If one of them goes down, it will stop contributing processing power. Something like that. You get shares. From the mining pool, you get shares. So if your entire fleet of mining hardware goes offline, you won't make any shares, you won't get any rewards. But if your computer closes for like 10 minutes, you will lose that processing power for that period of time and you will make less money. If you restart your machine, you won't lose practically anything. Unless, like, maybe you will lose a couple shares, which is nothing. Cool? Yeah?
How many cryptocurrencies are there now, and how often do they actually either split and a new cryptocurrency is formed?
Right. Good question. There are hundreds. There's likely, I guess the best answer I can give you is that there's the top 20 and the shitcoins. The top 20 are currencies that have some form of stability and a reasonable market cap. The rest are experiments, right? Now, what was the second part of your question?
Like, so Ethereum was a split.
Yeah, how fast right. So they split every time the majority chooses to do something differently, right? Some people will choose not to follow the new approach, and they will essentially fork the currency into two different implementations. That's why you have Ethereum and Ethereum Classic and Bitcoin and all these things. So they split whenever a change is applied. Sometimes the fork will die off. So the people who are, when the fork happens, the people who start mining the old version might choose that, yeah, it's probably a bad idea to stay here, so I'll mine the other one. And then essentially, as the population decreases, the cryptocurrency is reduced, the market cap is reduced to nothing. Cool. So let's look at the time here. We have very little. Yeah? We have 5 minutes? I'll show you this video. Don't worry about the volume. It's essentially one of the biggest mining facilities in Iceland.
He was attracted to Iceland mainly because of its geothermal power plants, which produce green electricity from the water of hot springs.
See, this guy is using geothermal power to do his mining because it's cheap. So he makes a nice, he increases his profitability by doing that. He has also economies of scale, and it's actually not an individual. This is a company doing it. They're selling hashing power as a service.
From the outside, the hangars look gray and inconspicuous.
Do they tax it?
Few Icelanders
Good question.
huge amounts of virtual
They're trying.
produced here every day.
It's very hard to regulate. Very hard. Because of anonymity, because the exchanges will move somewhere that there's no regulations. And this is a global currency.
The point is to evade regulation.
If I'm in favor of regulation,
The point is to evade regulation.
well, not the point,
Like one of the.
but one of the key things is that nobody can regulate it. Nobody can enforce his opinion on the network.
If you want to get a loan or something, you know credit history if you use Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Pay your loan.
That's an interesting thing to think about.
Could be a new business idea.
Is it the case that if somebody gets your account number, they know every single transaction?
Yes,
you did?
yes. when you're buying something with cryptocurrency, the only thing that can give you out is your IP address. If someone maps that IP address to your personal information, he will have permanently mapped, keyed your address in the cryptocurrency to your personal information, right?
So you store.
But it's hard to do that. It's hard to go from an IP address to your personal information, especially if you use like Tor networks and things like that. That goes in the realms of impossibility. You know, it's anonymous. It's pseudonymous. It's hard to deduct someone's personal information from an address. But if I show you, for instance, let's take this example here. Yes. So this shows the biggest accounts in Ethereum. You will see how the money is distributed in these accounts, and the biggest ones are mapped. They are exchanges. People know because they receive money from them that these are the accounts. This will take some time to load.
Who regulates the exchanges, or is there again?
Exchanges are companies that will gladly buy money from you, euros, in exchange for crypto, and they will sell crypto to you for exchange of money. So they may perform these transactions. That's why I have the exchange fees there. That's how they make money. Anyway,
Are
this
they regulated by some financial authority, or they're not?
depends. Coinbase is one of the exchanges. It's based in States and Europe. It's focused on the European and American markets, and it is regulated to some extent. That's why it's not anonymous. When you register for a Coinbase account, you need to provide your full identity. But there are other exchanges that are anonymous. Does this make sense?
I heard something about like torrent clients like uTorrent and all of them that they had embedded like mining software in them that they were using. Anyone who uses software kind of like a botnet. Have you heard of that before?
I haven't, but it's a good comparison. Torrents are a decentralized system, much like the one I described. There are similar technologies. Now, botnets, you have to think about them as a security vulnerability, because people might argue that if I have enough bots, I can take over a network. I can take over a cryptocurrency. But nobody has that many bots, especially for the big, the top 20 cryptocurrencies. You will need to have, an immense amount of bots with specific hardware. And when you run those, people will notice because their PCs will be crippled. They will run at 100% capacity, fans will start spinning. That's not how you run bots. Okay, so if there are any questions, fire away at any point. I'm just showing you my graph. This is the pool that I'm using. This is my hardware. I turned one of the graphics cards yesterday to demonstrate what's going on here. I turned it back on when I came for work, before I came for work. So you can see here that my node produces this amount of hash rate, and here are my payments. So this is the pool sending me money at specified intervals when I reach a certain amount of shares. We can create a new wallet if you want. Essentially, I'm typing a new password. Click this button, download the keystore file, and I'm done. This is my address. That's it. No name, nothing. And this is a dashboard that shows the various cryptocurrencies, how they're doing in terms of their exchange rates compared to US dollars. This is Bitcoin, this is Ethereum.
What's the range? Is that over a day or a week?
That's a day. And this is an interesting one. This is collecting information from some of the nodes to deduct statistics about the Ethereum network. It can tell you that the average block time is roughly 30 seconds, which is what I explained earlier. It can tell you the average network hash rate and the difficulty at any given time. The rest I haven't explained. It's for another session. And this one is going to help you if you want to try and run the numbers yourselves. So for instance, let's say you want to mine Ethereum. There are blogs that will tell you how much hash rate a specific graphics card will yield. So 30 megahashes per second is roughly what I get for my graphics cards. And this is the power consumption I'm getting once I've undervolted and overclocked them. So I can tell you that right now this is what I'm getting, which is very low compared to what I was getting 2 months earlier because of the difficulty spike. But that's again another subject. This is per card per month after all the fees minus the pool fee and the developer fee. That's the profit. So that goes in my pocket. Any questions?
Like cryptocurrency that is out, like you mentioned, forks being created, and new cryptocurrencies being created. When a cryptocurrency is no more, you basically lose all your money you had in that.
Correct. So cryptos are not based on trust, but they are based on faith. So that's the main difference. It takes a while to understand it. The difference is that you don't have to trust that the network will do the right thing. They will do the right thing because before they apply a change, you can choose to move, right? They will always do what they are currently doing unless they promote a change, and you will have enough time to decide whether you want to stick with it or not. So faith is different. Faith is, having faith that the 1 Ether you bought today will have some value tomorrow. That depends on supply and demand. If people buy coins, the price will go up. If people sell coins, the price will go down. It behaves like a stock market, more or less.
And if there are no exchanges?
Exchanges is the best way to make money. That is really risk-free because people will exchange no matter what. They will always get their cut. Goes up, good. Goes down, good. They get their fees no matter what. People sell, they make profit. People buy, they make profit. When you're investing in crypto, you're putting your money in a crypto. That's high risk. High risk, high reward. Because price might go down and you will lose all your money. Now, in between those two, exchanges and investments, is mining. Because it is really risk-free if you think about it. Say you buy hardware, right? And you mine for 2 days and Armageddon happens, right? The entire crypto industry is destroyed. You can return your hardware. Companies will reimburse you your money. But if it goes after that period where they won't accept you to return the hardware, then you will probably have made enough money to cover the loss of selling it secondhand. So if you mine for 2 months and everything and Armageddon happens, you can still sell your hardware for roughly 80% of the value, and you'll make that amount during that period. That difference, the 20%, you'll mine it. I mean, there is some risk, but I can't see it. The risk is that you make a mistake. You buy the wrong type of hardware and it doesn't mine, right? But if you do your homework, if you read the blogs, if you have your uptime, things will go smoothly.
But these currencies are worth money because exchanges will sell them for cash that we know today. if there are no exchanges?
Not necessarily, because let's take the exchanges out of the picture. Let's say we here have a Costas coin, and you know that if you give me one Costas coin, I will work for your project for 1 hour.
Yeah.
That's also based on faith, but there are no exchanges in the way. The reason why we have exchanges is because these currencies are not mainstream yet.
Yeah, so if the exchanges were gone, the currencies aren't mainstream enough yet that they could be used as a proper currency.
Yeah.
Some shops use them and so on. But if all the exchange, like China got rid of all exchanges, they banned exchanges. If every other country followed suit,
it might affect the price. It will affect the price. For instance, China decided to block exchanges operating in China, and that affected the prices of crypto. For instance,
but like the real purpose of this is that people make money out of it.
Yeah.
That's really what it's there. So
Let's see. So this is China announcing that they will stop cryptocurrencies. It took a dip, then recovered. Because what happened was people took all their money from the China exchanges. They kept it for a while to see how the market will behave. And when they saw an upward trend, they said, oh yeah, that's nothing. Market is recovering, I'll just buy back in. So this kind of behavior is what I expect. But again, this is investing. I'm not good. My advice are not good here. I can talk about mining more comfortably than I can talk for investments.
yeah.
I've never done investments. I've never bought a single euro.
The exchanges impact the value of money.
Yes, they do. It's anything affects the value of mining of crypto. It's based on faith. Anything that affects faith, they have this term called FUD: fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Once one of those things is introduced in the market, you see a downward trend.
It's the same as the pound, like when they announced Brexit, pound went down. So it's the same as any currency.
I can tell you that dollar is probably taking a hit because of the cryptocurrencies, because they are introducing FUD for the dollar value. People are saying, hey, Bitcoin is now $100 billion market. $100 billion. Maybe that's the future. Maybe my dollar will be worth less tomorrow because people will start trusting it. It works both ways.
A couple of things I want to mention. One of the biggest game distributors in the world, Steam, uses Bitcoin. So other thing as well. Goldman Sachs has the highest number of patents for cryptocurrencies. So it's not like something that's for blockchain really, blockchain projects. I'm trying to think of other big things, but
Well, I'd like to put this as a punchline in your heads. What is interesting here is the technology. I haven't really scratched the surface of what this thing does and how it works. If we talk about Ethereum, there's tremendous value other than just financial transactions. And I know you guys did a hackathon project this year. We did a similar one last year. You can write entire applications and run on this network. And there is an attached utility to that cryptocurrency. And that's what I find the most interesting. That's why I wanted to do this talk. And I think people, if you find this slightly interesting, I think you will find it increasingly interesting as you drill into the details and as you uncover how this thing works internally. The algorithms, the decision making, the consensus algorithms, these are all really fascinating.
Do you know who created
The first white paper is from Satoshi Nakamoto, I think. Yeah. And that's a pseudonym, I think. Nobody knows who this guy is. He created a white paper describing how decentralized currency would work. People tried it out. That's Bitcoin, essentially. And since then, people are trying to improve it. And that's why new currencies are created that add some new utility to the cryptocurrency. Sia Coin, for instance, allows people to upload files in the decentralized computer in this network. You can upload files much like in Dropbox, and you pay in that crypto. You pay for use, you pay for uploading. things like that. Any more questions? I don't think I have anything else in the slides. I have this blah blah blah. Yeah. That's it. I think. Yeah, I have this, but I don't remember who asked the first question. Who asked the first question? Was it Niv? It was you. Okay, you'll get 0.025 ether. You have. Yeah. Ether. ETH stands for ether. You can buy a pint of beer with it. That's it. Thanks, guys.